the air. We are in the south lawns of the White House. I'm sure you can hear the people chanting, and a lot of people have gathered here. People from the Indian community who've come from across the United States of America to greet Prime Minister Modi.
Even more momentous development in another AI, America and India.
Please join me in a toast. Here it comes. The good news for both of us, neither of us drink.
मैंने देखा है कि आपकी मेहमान नवाजी से प्रभावित होकर कई बार आपके मेहमान गाना भी गाने लगते हैं। काश मुझ में भी गाने की कला होती तो मैं भी आपको कुछ सुनाता।
You've seen the pictures, the pomp and the ceremony. Thursday packed in a lot. Like I said, it was a big day for the Indian Prime Minister. He has visited the United States multiple times, but this was his first state visit. So everything was more grand. The Americans have rolled out the red carpet before, but this one you could say was bigger and better. We were inside the White House, and we can say that it was a welcome like no other. There were marching troops on the South Lawn, thousands of Indian Americans waiting, bilateral talks in the Oval Office, and then a grand state dinner customized to accommodate the Prime Minister's vegetarian diet. The two leaders hugged, they walked together, they addressed a press conference together and seemed to be sharing jokes at the state dinner. The optics could not have been better. They're talking about a new era in the US-India partnership.
भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों के इतिहास में एक विशेष महत्व रखता है। आज की हमारी चर्चा और हमारे द्वारा लिए गए महत्वपूर्ण निर्णयों से हमारी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव ग्लोबल स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ा है।
A lot of deals and agreements have been signed. Many meetings are lined up today. It's a jam-packed schedule. Prime Minister Modi is meeting CEOs. There's a lunch with Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and finally a meeting with the Indian diaspora. So it won't be an exaggeration to call it one of the most substantive visits. But do remember, this is an election year, both in India and the US. And the stakes are high for both the leaders. And the politics was very much at play. So an interview and a press conference seemed to be taking up more mind space and feeding the social media chatter than all the work done. Well, that's the nature of this beast for you, the beast called politics. So let's tell you about these two as well. First, the press conference. It was a rare one for the Indian Prime Minister. He's long been criticized for not facing the press and not taking questions. On Thursday, he did. He met the press in the East Room of the White House. We were there, and they were running behind schedule, so both leaders decided to take only two questions, one from the American press and one from the Indian press. Now remember what this visit is about. Defense partnership, semiconductors, the China challenge, trade, space collaboration, a host of other things. But the Indian Prime Minister was asked about this, religious freedom in India.
India has long prided itself as the world's largest democracy, but there are many human rights groups who say that your government has discriminated against religious minorities and sought to silence its critics.
लोग कहते हैं नहीं भारत डेमोक्रेसी है और जैसा राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन ने कहा भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। लोकतंत्र हमारा स्पिरिट है, लोकतंत्र हमारे रगों में है, लोकतंत्र को हम जीते और हमारे पूर्वजों ने उसको शब्दों में ढाला है संविधान के रूप में, और हमारी सरकार लोकतंत्र के मूलभूत मूल्यों को आधार लेकर के बने हुए संविधान के आधार पर चलती है। इसलिए भारत के लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में कोई भेदभाव नहीं है, न धर्म के आधार पर, न जाति के आधार पर, न उम्र के आधार पर, न भूभाग के आधार पर।
Prime Minister Modi says democracy is in our DNA. The question was asked by the Wall Street Journal's Sabrina Siddiqui, an Indian origin American reporter. Ahead of the visit, she even wrote an opinion piece. And let me quote from the first line of that piece. President Biden will host a complicated guest, Narendra Modi, whose country is a vital bulwark against China, but whose government has a checkered record on human rights. That's her opinion piece. Now, that's her opinion, and of course, she's entitled to it, like all journalists and all individuals are. My point is, her views were known, and yet she's the one who got to ask the question. And this is what democracy is about. You disagree, you debate, yet you engage. And exchanges like these only strengthen that, so we say the world can do with more press conferences. Now, even before this one began, the clips of an interview began doing the rounds. It featured a former US President, Barack Obama. He spoke to CNN and he was asked about India. Let me quote from what he said. If I had a conversation with Prime Minister Modi, who I know well, part of my argument would be that if you do not protect the rights of ethnic minorities in India, there is a strong possibility at some point that India starts pulling apart. So Obama believes that India risks pulling apart. Let me rephrase that for you. Here's a former US president speaking in the language of Pakistanis and Khalistanis and being cheered by some political pairs in India. He's predicting India's breakup. Now, to comment on or criticize a country is one thing. To speak of its breakup is quite another. In this case, it seems both motivated and dangerously exaggerated. And look at the timing. I'm sure it was sheer coincidence that this interview came out just as Prime Minister Modi and President Biden sat down for the bilateral. Obama knows that Prime Minister Modi is in America for a state visit. He knows what his former vice president is saying about India. What do you think he was trying to do here? Embarrass Modi and by extension his host, Joe Biden? Or playing the bad cop while Biden plays the good host? Honestly, it's hard to say, although this is not the first time that Barack Obama has talked about India's religious freedom. In 2015, during his visit to India, he brought up the subject and now he's predicting India's division. It's a dangerous game of narrative war, and it has become a slugfest on social media now. The other side is digging up details on how many bombs Obama dropped on Muslim countries and how many Muslims were killed by Americans on his watch, and it only goes downhill from here. I expect this to continue for a while. It shows that for all the progress the India-US relationship has made, there is still more work to be done. And that along with the jet engines and the semiconductors, the odd sermons will be thrown in. It's up to Modi and Biden to cancel the noise and keep the work going. Another big highlight of the day was Prime Minister Modi's address to the US Congress. It's what they call the American Parliament, situated in the iconic Capitol building. The Indian leader addressed a joint session of the US Congress, the only Indian leader to do so twice. The first time he did it was in 2016. Yesterday was the second time. Only a handful of world leaders have done this, the likes of Winston Churchill and Benjamin Netanyahu. So what was different from his 2016 speech? For starters, the length. The first one was about 45 minutes, this one around an hour. And what did the Prime Minister talk about? Well, everything, from trade to technology and defense to democracy. This is what he said about India-US relations.
In the past few years, there have been many advances in AI, artificial intelligence. At the same time, there have been even more momentous development in another AI, America and India.
It's already trending. AI, America and India, he said. He also spoke about the growing defense ties.
At the turn of century, now the United States has become one of our most important defense partners. I would say the scope of our cooperation is endless. The potential of our synergies is limitless. And the chemistry in our relations is effortless.
But cooperation is impossible without people. And in this case, the Indian Americans. So the Indian leader spoke about the Samosa Caucus. It's what they call a group of Indian Americans in the US Congress.
There are millions here who have roots in India. Some of them sit proudly in this chamber. And there is one behind me who has made history. I'm told that the Samosa Caucus is now the flavor of the house. I hope it grows and brings the full diversity of Indian cuisine here.
So friendship is great, but India and US share a common challenge too, and that is China. And Prime Minister Modi spoke about China in perhaps the strongest possible terms yet. As always, he did not name the country, but what he said stands out.
A region where all nations, small and large, are free and fearless in their choices, where progress is not suffocated by an impossible burdens of debt. Where connectivity is not leveraged for strategic purposes, where all nations are lifted by the high tide of shared prosperity.
The other issue he tackled was the Ukraine war. The Prime Minister reiterated that this was the era of peace.
With the Ukraine conflict, war has returned to Europe. It is causing great pain in the region. Since it involves major powers, the outcomes are severe. Countries of the global south have been particularly affected. The global order is based on the respect for the principle of the UN Charter, peaceful resolution of disputes, and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity.
He spoke about how the war affects the global south. And that's a region whose cause India has championed. The Prime Minister is pushing to include the African Union in the G20.
As we emerge out of the pandemic, we must give shape to a new world order. Consideration, care, and concern are the need of the hour. Giving a voice to the global south is the way forward. That is why I firmly believe that the African Union be given full membership of G20.
Throughout his speech, there was one common thread: the focus on India's democratic credentials.
Democracy is the spirit that supports equality and dignity. Democracy is the idea that welcomes debate and discourse. Democracy is the culture that gives wings to thought and expression. India is blessed to have such values from times immemorial. In the evolution of the democratic spirit, India is the mother of democracy.
Prime Minister Modi wrapped up the speech with a poem that he said he once wrote. Listen to this.
I am reminded of a poem that I once wrote. आसमान में सिर उठाकर, आसमान में सिर उठाकर, घने बादलों को चीरकर, रोशनी का संकल्प ले, अभी तो सूरज उगा है. अभी तो सूरज उगा है. दृढ़ निश्चय के साथ चलकर, दृढ़ निश्चय के साथ चलकर, हर मुश्किल को पार कर, घोर अंधेरे को मिटाते, घोर अंधेरे को मिटाने, अभी तो सूरज उगा है.
This speech resonated with Congress members. There were a total of 15 standing ovations, 79 rounds of applause. And when the Prime Minister finished, Congress members rushed to meet him. Some wanted an autograph, others wanted a selfie with him. All in all, a very successful second address at the US Congress, one that attests to India's growing global stature. Now let's tell you about the takeaways from this visit. A lot of agreements have been signed. We'll tell you about the 5 big deals. Number 1 is jet engines. India and America will jointly produce jet engines. And this is very significant. It involves America's General Electric and India's Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited. GE will share the technology. HAL will make the engines. This is critical technology transfer from the United States to India, the first of its kind, and it's being called as consequential as the 2008 nuclear deal. Second on the list is the drone deal. We've been telling you about this for days now. It's official. India will buy 31 drones from the United States, 15 for the Indian Navy and 8 each for the Army and the Air Force. Now, there's a Make in India component here too. The drones will be assembled in India. Its maker, General Atomics, will set up a facility in India. Deal number 3 is semiconductors. Again, multiple agreements on this front. There are investments to assemble and test chips in India, also to set up research and training centers. 3 companies will make major investments: Micron Technology, Applied Materials, and Lam Research. Now, deal number 4 is space collaboration. India has joined the Artemis Accords. This is an American initiative, the Artemis Accords. It aims to take humans to the moon by 2025 and to expand space cooperation to Mars and beyond. India has joined this initiative. As part of this, India and the US will undertake a joint mission in 2024. This will be at the International Space Station. Both countries will conduct space activities together. And finally, deal number 5, the decision to settle 6 trade disputes at the WTO, or the World Trade Organization. Now, India and America had multiple outstanding disputes at the WTO. Washington has decided on something like an out-of-court settlement. It is also withdrawing tariffs. Customs duties on 28 items are now gone. Taxes on Indian steel and aluminium, plus duties on American chickpeas, lentils, almonds, walnuts, apples, all of these things have been withdrawn. And all of these were introduced during the Trump era. You would remember, he used to keep complaining about taxes in India, so Trump had launched a mini trade war of sorts with India, and India had hit back with retaliatory tariffs. This war is now ending. And these were the 5 big deals, the major announcements. These were all complicated, long pending issues. But in the spirit of looking beyond differences, both sides have now resolved them. They're focusing on economic ties built on 3 key pillars: technology transfer, co-development, and co-production. They're looking to leverage each other's strength. The US, its technology, and India, its giant workforce.
And with this visit, we're demonstrating once more how India and the United States are collaborating on nearly every human endeavor and delivering progress across the board. From designing new ways to diagnose and treat illnesses like cancer and diabetes, to collaborating on human spaceflight, including sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station in 2024, to accelerating a global clean energy transition and tackling the climate crisis.
Among the other agreements, the US Navy will be able to make a stop in Indian shipyards. There is a pact on critical minerals. India has joined the Mineral Security Partnership. It's a US-led effort involving 12 countries. Then there is some relief on the visa front. Indians will not have to travel back home to renew or restamp their visas. They're opening more consulates. India will have a new one in Seattle. And Indian defense liaison officials will now be stationed in American defense commands. A lot of this would have been unthinkable a few decades ago, but now it is being done. And that's my cue to tell you about the Grand State Dinner, a 400-person soiree hosted by the Bidens in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It was certainly a high-stakes dinner, but you see, it was also so much more, because Modi brought a secret weapon to the house, his comedy game. Seriously, he kept the audience in stitches. There were distinguished names and titans of industry. They had a vegetarian bash, because for the first time in recent history, the state dinner was entirely plant-based. It was also an unlikely celebration of fashion, replete with sequins and saris. We'll tell you all about it. Also, go back to the basics. Why is the tradition of state dinner such a big deal? And which ones have been the most memorable ones? Here's a report.
Creamy risotto infused with saffron, crisped millet cakes, portobello mushrooms. Looks delicious, right? But don't worry, we are not here to talk about elevating the mushroom, and our intention isn't to make you hungry. We are only talking about the White House State Dinner, held in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which for the first time in recent history was entirely plant-based. That means no meat, no dairy, and no eggs. All thanks to the guest of honor, who is a strict vegetarian.
As some of you may know, Prime Minister Modi is a vegetarian. So we asked Chef Nina Curtis, a plant-based pioneer, to work with our White House chefs and create a stunning vegetarian menu.
And stunning it was. The food married classic American ingredients with distinctly Indian elements. In a palatable homage to India's rich cuisine, the food prominently featured saffron, a signature flavor of Indian cuisine, whose color is closely associated with the Hindu culture. And notice the nod to millet in the dishes, which makes complete sense. India is the world's leading millet producer, accounting for 20% of the global output. Prime Minister Modi has even promoted millets for global benefit on the world stage. Because here's more than a grain of truth. This wasn't just any meal. The dinner was about high-stakes diplomacy. So the menu was chosen with PM Modi's needs and preferences in mind. After all, the gala dinner was in his honor. And speaking of gala, just look at the guest list. Around 400 guests were invited to the dinner. An eclectic mix of government officials, business leaders, star athletes, and renowned artists. Business tycoons like Mukesh Ambani, who was there along with his wife Neeta. Anand Mahindra, Sundar Pichai, Chief Executive of Alphabet, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO. Iconic tennis player Billie Jean King, filmmaker M. Night Shyamalan. In addition to this mix, a clutch of high-profile fashion figures attended, including designer Ralph Lauren and Indian entrepreneur Karishma Swali. Now the Biden administration tends to shy away from conversations about style, but the gala was clearly a friendly overture to the world of fashion, with sequins, saris, and saffron silks. But despite this pomp and pageantry, something else completely stole the show. The camaraderie between Biden and Modi, which was engulfed in heartwarming laughs. See for yourself.
Mr. Prime Minister, I had an Irish grandfather named Ambrose Finnegan, and he used to say that when you give a toast and you don't have any alcohol in your glass, you must do it with your left hand. You think I'm kidding? I'm not.
And we'll tell you what we aren't kidding about. How PM Modi brought his ace comedy game to the dinner. He cracked jokes about the time President Joe Biden wanted him to eat even though he was fasting, and about his lack of singing chops, referring to South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol, who surprised guests by getting up on stage during a White House state dinner, honoring him in April, and belted out a rendition of American Pie, one of his favorite songs.
Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't have one more step. I can't remember if I tried when I read about his willow bride. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
This was definitely one of the most memorable state dinner moments. What were the others? State dinner for King George VI in 1939, when a British monarch set foot on American soil for the first time, and 200 years after the US declared its independence from Great Britain.
FDR invited King George VI and his wife Elizabeth to
A state dinner saw dance floor diplomacy.
Go to bed that night.
In 1976, then American President Gerald Ford danced with the late Queen of England. So did Princess Diana with John Travolta in 1985 in a state dinner by President Ronald Reagan. Then in 1987, in his first visit to the US, then Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev arrived in Washington to sign the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And last year, President Biden spent his first state dinner with French President Emmanuel Macron. They had hot dogs and partied until 1 a.m. You see, Washington state dinners are nights of glitzy entertainment. But don't be mistaken, under that guise, they are a chance to push foreign dignitaries to align with American interests. It looks like song and dance, but it's geopolitics. We'll tell you what we are talking about. The first state dinner was held in 1874 by President Ulysses Grant for King David Kalakaua of Hawaii to strengthen trade. In 1959, President Dwight Eisenhower invited Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, because he wanted to thaw Cold War tensions after the launch of Sputnik. In 2015, President Barack Obama hosted President Xi Jinping of China, before which the two countries negotiated for weeks over an arms control accord for cyberspace. Washington state dinners are aimed at strengthening political partnerships overseas, and Prime Minister Modi knows this well. But he seems to have hit a home run, all while cracking up his audience.
Biden may be basking in the success of Prime Minister Modi's visit. As it wraps up today, he'll have to work on his domestic challenges. And top of the list is economy. The last few months have been all about the economy in the US. You may remember the debt ceiling drama. Only last month, President Biden had to cancel the Quad summit to deal with the debt ceiling issue. So economy is clearly one of his bigger challenges. There have been fears of recession in America. The projections differ, but they all point to one direction. The pain is not going away in a hurry. When Biden met the press after holding talks with Prime Minister Modi, he did not waste the opportunity to highlight what he's doing about it and how engagements with India will help America and American families. For example, the Air India deal with Boeing. It could create 1 million American jobs across 44 states. Biden's message for the middle class and his core voter base was clear. He was trying to work for them. They've suffered the worst of America's economic pressures. For months, there was crippling inflation in the US. Everything was getting more and more expensive. That seems to have cooled off for now. Eggs are cheaper, so is gas. But does that mean the worst is over? The US Fed chair says, no, it's not. That's the head of their central bank. This is what he said.
Inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year. Nonetheless, inflation pressures continue to run high, and the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go.
This has been a long battle for the US Federal Reserve. They have raised interest rates multiple times, 10 hikes in 14 months, and that's a lot. Central banks hike interest rates to cool the economy. How does that work? Well, more interest rates mean higher borrowing costs. So a consumer will immediately spend less. And once spending falls, demand falls too. And it leads to a dip in the price of everyday goods, so lower inflation. Now, for the US Fed, the hikes were a desperate attempt, an attempt to get prices back to normal. They may have skipped one rate hike last week, but the war is not over yet. What does that mean? Well, simply put, there could be more rate hikes in America. In the month of May, US inflation rate was 4.1%. That's the lowest it has been since March 2021. But it remains nearly double of 2%. 2% is the rate that the Fed considers healthy, 2% inflation. Right now, it's more than double of that. Now, it has eased a bit, but there's another problem that persists. The crisis within the housing sector. Commercial real estate is struggling in America. Thousands of offices are empty in top cities, the likes of New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Going by one claim, in New York alone, vacant office space could fill more than 26 Empire State buildings. The golden days of buying and flipping houses for money is also over. Investors are losing money on 1 in every 7 homes that they sell. Imagine that, 1 in 7. It's the highest rate since 2016. Also, why are so many offices empty? Because people are not coming back to work. So workplaces are ending their leases and moving to smaller offices. The US economy is losing steam, and it did not happen overnight. A series of events led to this. At the beginning of this year, multiple American banks failed. We've been telling you about this. Then came the layoffs. The tech industry, which is a key economic driver, slashed jobs by the thousands. The US stock market has flatlined, so everyone is nervous. President Biden needs to revive the spirits, and that's why he needs India for the big ticket orders and to shore up his own economic record. And I know it sounds ironic. The world's biggest economy needs a hand from a developing power. But that's what it has come down to. You need steady friends sometimes to get through the hard times. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Ahead of Hajj, pilgrims performed Friday prayers at Mecca's Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia. A massive hailstorm in Colorado injured concert goers in an amphitheater. The apple-sized hail was caught on camera. Orcas were filmed nudging the rudder of a yacht as it competed in a race near Gibraltar. And finally, what makes the 23rd of June significant? We're taking you back in history to 1757, when the Battle of Plassey was fought. It is remembered as a historic battle and a turning point in the history of India when the British East India Company defeated the Nawab of Bengal, marking the start of nearly 2 centuries of British rule in India. We're leaving you with these. Thanks for watching. See you.
الله لمن حميده ربنا ولك الحمد الله أكبر الله